This is a follow-up from my video, You Are Not Your Flaws. I'm just going to go right into it. Tell you some of the things, some more things that I observed when I was little, when I was a kid. You know, I would say between the ages of 7 and about 14. Those were the major years when a whole lot of these things were transpiring. The things that I'm getting ready to go into. Just want you to know that I do have some notes because there are some points that I really don't want to miss these certain points. But after the 60s, I had mentioned the irresponsible generation when they went into spending a whole lot of time in the clubs and everything, on these Soul Train lines, how everybody would go out and buy all of these animated looking clothes when they had other things that they needed to take care of, like feeding their children. And I was talking to enough of the people who used to be involved in that, and they had admitted that a whole lot of the money that they spent trying to be flashy, and you might as well say animated, in other words, this image that they was trying to portray out there, not only on the Soul Train when everyone wanted to have a whole lot of attention, a lot of people wanted other people to awe at them and point at them, and you buying all of these clothes and you doing all these ridiculous dances down the Soul Train line, and you wasn't even getting paid for it. You was not even getting paid for it. And so, I was told that someone had listened to one of my earlier videos way back, I believe it was like a couple of years ago. I put it up and I was talking about the effects of the Black exploitation era. And all of this was transpiring right along at the same time when people were wasting their time, on Soul Train. But this brother had told me, well, it was the Black exploitation era in which saved Hollywood, because Hollywood had ran out of ideas and writers and everything, and Hollywood was in trouble. And so they came up with this Black exploitation idea. And this was ran by, this was cultivated and financed by the Jewish community. And so they said, well, they allowed a whole lot of Black people a chance to get into, acting and all of that. Well, that's fine. You put that on the surface. But after the 60s and after the Black Panther Party, one of the primary reasons why they had started the Black exploitation era is because they did a poll and they started asking a whole lot of Black people about their current conditions after the Civil Rights movement and how they felt about all of the Black leaders being assassinated. And they had come to find out that a lot of Black people were still angry about it. And they felt that their Black leaders were just cut off, and they never had a chance to really cultivate to make it a further effect on the Black community to where conditions could be better. But the real reason behind the Black exploitation was after they did these polls, they understood that Black people were still angry in the current reality of what was going on. And so when they had agreed to save Hollywood, all of a sudden they started integrating these struggling Black actors who actually, most of them couldn't even act, if you ask me. But they gave these people a chance not only to save Hollywood, but for them to take Black people's anger and frustrations and what Black people wish that they could do to the quote unquote man. They had these black people acting these things out in these movies to take black people's real reality from the streets and put it up on the screen and make it a fantasy that black people will be able to sit down and look at it and feel good, suddenly feel good about their situation because they're looking at it on screen. And then when you leave the theater, you feel much better because you're actually seeing it on the screen, and you just totally forgot that what you were looking at on the screen was not only a fantasy, but it was a tool for pacification. Now you're looking up to these figures like Shaft and Superfly, Cleopatra Jones and Coffee. You know, these people are doing things that you know yourself could never go down in real life. Here's Jim Kelly, this black martial artist who starred in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. He starred in a movie called Three the Hard Way, which also involved two more major black actors with Fred Williamson and brother Jim Brown. Now here's a black man who's getting set up by the cops. The cops pull him over. They search his car. They find some drugs that the cops had put in his car anyway to try to set him up. And so Jim Kelly says, "You trying to set me up?" And there's four cops. All of a sudden he went off, and these cops didn't have any guns. All they had were what we used to call blackjacks. He beats up four cops, knocks them all out. Now this is in broad daylight. And then after this happens, here comes brother Fred Williamson, brother Jim Brown, coming up to brother Jim Kelly. And they're laughing all out in the open, saying, "Oh, you still putting in work," and blah, blah, blah. They talking. And so they said, "Well, let's go get something to eat." They go to a nearby restaurant. Jim Kelly's car, still there in the street. Four cops, still laying in the street, beat up. Now you're observing this, you're like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's how I feel. See, you fell for it. They took it from reality and they put it on the screen to pacify you by way of a fantasy of what you wish you can do. However, you still get satisfaction more so through the fantasy because you know that this could never go down in reality. And so here it is. You have movies like The Mac. Everybody wanted to be the Mac. And I had a pimp that I grew up with. His name was Red. And whenever I talk about Red, people think that I'm not being honest because his description had fit Malcolm X so much when he was called Detroit Red. But I'm just telling you who I knew. This was a black and Irish brother. He was 6'4", and therefore he was shorter than Malcolm because brother Malcolm X was 6'5.5". And so Red was black and Irish, as Malcolm was. But Red used to drive this red 1972 Eldorado, and he would come by and visit my family because he knew my uncles, he knew my mother, he knew everyone. He knew everyone in the home. And so he would sometimes pay me and my friends like $5 each to wipe down or clean his red Eldorado. So one night he was over to our place a little bit more later than he usually would be. And so I'm sitting on the front porch. This was at night. I'm sitting on the front porch And he sees me sitting there, and all of a sudden he comes, he sits next to me. He said, "What you sitting out here for, young blood?" He's called me young blood. And I said, I'm just sitting here thinking. He said, "What you thinking about?" And so I threw it on him. I said, "Red, how do you make your money?" And he opened up and he told me that he was a pimp. And he told me that I take care of women who are lost. And he said that, you know, the movies that they're putting out right now, he said, those are not pimps, those are clowns. The way that they dress, those big hats and everything. The reason why he pointed that out, because if you were to meet Red in person, he looked like a businessman. And you really wouldn't know that he was an outright pimp unless you asked him, the same as I had to. And he told me that he doesn't abuse the women. He says, I take care of them and they take care of me. He said they have their own place. They have their own bank accounts and everything. He said, now, we do go to places like the airport and Greyhound, where a whole lot of these women are coming in as runaways, and they're looking for that father figure, and therefore someone who's going to take care of them and so-called love them. And in exchange for them being this father figure or the strong male figure, they tell them what they're going to have to do to maintain that relationship until they decide to get out. And we all know what that is. But to move forward, as I was saying, these blaxploitation films were basically what Black people wish that they could do. I'm just going to read these notes. It says, taking what Black people wish they could do from their reality and placing it upon a screen with intent for them to live out what they are truly feeling through a fantasy. This was a form of pacification and trying to live out that because in real living and will eventually, you know, we started trying to get satisfaction from these movies because we knew that if we tried to actually live like that, it would be a form of self-destruction because of the system. And you know, when you look at people like Superfly, what a lot of people misunderstand about Superfly, which was the character that Brother Ron O'Neal had played. Superfly was actually trying to get out. And a whole lot of people who, in this generation, when they talk about Superfly, they're talking about this millennial Superfly, which is totally different. The same way that Samuel L. Jackson played Shaft in these current movies, other than the real Shaft, who was played by Richard Roundtree, who was a very intelligent, hard brother. He didn't take nothing from nobody. Now, the one who Samuel L. Jackson played was a joke. It was a joke. So when you're dealing with these type of things, you look it up at the screen, you know, man, I wish that I was able to do that. Considering everything that we're suffering right now, dealing with this system. So they're taking, as I said before, they're taking what these people wish they could do and they're putting it up on the screen. And they're looking up to these images that were created by way of these Black exploitation movies. And they are observing these movies And observing these movies, being able to see what you wish that you could do in real life, it pacifies you and you get a sense of satisfaction out of seeing what you know you can do in your reality. So what Red had told me about these black exploitation movies, like the big, the Mac, Superfly, and all these, he said, "You see the way that I'm dressed?" He said, "I'm not dressed like anything what you see up on the screen." He said, "But let me tell you what they're going to do, young blood." He said, "These fools are going to sit there and they're going to watch those movies. And these helpless brothers who feel as though they have to find themselves and find their strengths," he said, "what they're going to do, they're going to duplicate what they see on the screen." He said, "Pretty soon, you're going to see a whole lot of brothers walking around looking like clowns. And instead of keeping themselves quiet about what they're doing," he said, "the reason why they put in these movies these characters saying, 'I'm a pimp, I'm a pimp,' you watch these fools start turning themselves in." And that's exactly what started happening. The next thing you know, you see these brothers walking around with these bright colored clothes on, these animated looking Eldorados and Cadillacs, beating up their women in public, wearing all these loud clothes. You remember in the Frank Lucas movie when Denzel Washington's character told his brother, "Why you got all this stuff on?" He said, the loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room." That's why when his wife had bought him that coat, he at first didn't want to wear it. And then when he compromised and he went to that Ali fight, because of the way he was dressed, he stood out among the crowd. See, Red never dressed like that. He never dressed like that. So what happened to Red? See, Red had a lot of information on a whole lot of cops and a whole lot of politicians in the city council, because a whole lot of those guys in city council, a lot of those guys were his customers, and a lot of those men were married. And so once word had got around that Red had became a threat to them, after Red came up missing for about 48 hours, his red Eldorado was parked in an alley on 75th and Blackstone in Chicago. And when they found Red was sitting in his driver's seat, and he had 4 bullets in his chest and 2 bullets in his gut, in his abdomen. And he laid there slumped over in the passenger seat, and he was dead. Now, the way that it looked to a whole lot of people, this wasn't a hit on him in terms of other pimps being jealous of him because of all of the wealth that he had. This was definitely political. It was political. It was either done by the police or the city council or both. See, the mistake that a lot of us make is that we think it's one or the other. But the way that a whole lot of emperors and I'll put it like this, the way that a lot of people, politicians, used to get away with taking down one emperor in whom they felt was a threat to their Roman rule, a lot of people would join a campaign to assassinate that one emperor in whom they said was a threat. And so when they would assassinate him, a lot of people would assassinate him, and everyone would kill him. The reason why everyone would participate in this man's assassination is because that leaves out one person being at fault. And just like Brother Malcolm, when he has so many enemies and King has so many enemies, when they were assassinated, they could barely find out who did it because they had so many enemies. So that's a Roman thing. That's been going on in the Western world for centuries. But as you go on, the next generation, already talked about the hip hop generation. Then, as this whole pimp thing was exploiting, and it went into darkness because it wasn't so outwardly done anymore, then a whole lot of those guys either got killed, or they were in prison, or they actually became politicians in Chicago and are in the city council until this day. And so as time goes on, just blaxploitation movies are still out there. The younger generation are coming up. Next thing you know, you have rappers like Too Short talking about he wants to be a pimp. Ice Cube making a song, Who's the Mac? Who's the Mac? See, you can't beat up on the hip hop generation. They're only making music based upon what they saw and felt in their environment. See, the hip hop generation, those young men and women at first were not lost. They were only expressing the environment that they had to grow up in because the parents compromised. And those politicians like Jesse Jackson and all of these people who were still living by way of aftercare, you might as well say they went into exile. Even though they were present, their silence and they're chosen to be non-active sent them into an exile because they didn't say or do anything in which would get the attention of the press that this government would think that they are in fact trying to carry on what Medgar Evers, Brother Malcolm, and Brother Dr. King established. So they went into exile by way of their silence and inactivity. And so because of that, here we are with the hip hop generation coming up. The first phase of the hip hop generation, those beautiful brothers like Public Enemy, who were and still is my favorite hip hop group, because they tried to continue to pull from everything that all of the Black leaders had established, because it was all in their music. It was all in their music. But as we all know, as time went on, the hip hop generation went into a state of darkness and which took the world into a dark place in terms of our community. You had this rap group in which I'd say are guilty of perverting the hip hop generation to Live Crew with so-called Uncle Luke. And then the next thing you know, you see these Black women exploiting themselves and all of that. But we saw a sign of that by way of a rap group in which came out of Oakland. It was called 357. So that was a sign of what was coming. And then next thing you know, you've got Two Live Crew. From Two Live Crew, you got these Little Kims and you've got these Trinas, and the next thing you know, you're looking at what you're looking at this day. these Foxy Browns, and everybody's gyrating on stage. And this is what took the hip hop culture into darkness. And it left the younger generation with no what you call positive way to express themselves, because the hip hop generation is corrupt. It's corrupt today. So, but we're still talking about people who are not their flaws. In spite of everything that I just put down, they are still people who are not guilty of what was put out there in the society. Now, the only ones who are guilty are the ones who chose the poison. I'm gonna be a pimp, I'm gonna be a drug dealer and all of that. Simply because that's put out there doesn't necessarily mean that you have to conform to it. But those who have conformed started poisoning our community, started selling drugs to our pregnant women who chose to destroy themselves and their families. And here it is, for 3 generations, we've been giving birth to children who have learning disabilities because their mothers were either drinking or doing drugs. And so now we give birth to another generation of kids who have learning disabilities, and therefore the intelligence level has been affected and therefore lowered because of the effects of alcohol and drugs. And so as each generation keeps repeating that same cycle, the intelligence level of the community is going to consistently decline. And this is what we're looking at today. So they took what Black people wanted to do and they put it on the screen because they knew this is what Black people wish they could do. And so when they put it on the screen, Black people ran to it and they paid our money. We paid our money, and we looked at these images because they were just images. Things that they knew you wish you could do to them. And then you're looking at these images and you're saying, I wish that I was like that. You see the whole mind trick? And then you coming out of the theater. I stood outside the theater. I've been observant all of my life. I stood outside the theaters. And I used to listen to the conversations that the brothers would have together. And sometimes Black women would get right in the conversations. And you would hear those brothers from that point on standing in front of the United Artists Theater or the Chicago Theater, which contained these movies. From that very point, they made up their minds that they were going to give up on themselves and become pimps and drug dealers. Because these movies made them think that they could live happily ever after as such. There's a part in the movie Superfly to where you had common Black people using cocaine. And there was a song by brother Curtis Mayfield, rest in peace. It's called Pusherman. And the lyrics were, I'm your mother, I'm your daddy, I'm that nigga in the alley. I'm your doctor in need, have some coke, have some weed. You know me, you know him, your main boy, thick and thin. I'm your pusherman. And the way that it was edited, along with his music behind it, it was practically a commercial that was advertising the use of cocaine. And I used to hear our people all the time play that song in the clubs. I'm your pusher, man. See, all of those forces coming together affects the mind. And it cultivates a self-destructive intention. And once you get yourself all involved in, you're in a well. And once you start drinking and using drugs, it becomes a web that has you addicted. And it's a web that you never want to leave. You know that you're caught in the web, but you don't want to leave it. Not only because it feels good, it takes you away from your real problems. It puts you in a position mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually, to where I would rather be here, high, drunk all the time, or living out one of the images that I saw on the screen, than to face my reality and to deal with it so that I'll be able to make my life better, not only for myself, but for my family, my children, or whoever that I'm with. I would rather stay here because I found a comfort zone in being in this web. And what has caused me to think and to believe that I'm all right here is the deceptive intelligence and my cowardness by way of using these drugs, which affect my mind, and to where I say, I'm chilling. No, your brain cells are being destroyed. And this is why you lack intelligence right now. It's not that you're high, you're actually at your lowest point in your self-development. You're killing yourself. And what for? Because I'm too much of a coward to face my reality. There's always a way out. And then they say, well, the white man ain't really left much for us. Well, take what little bit that was left and build on that. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. So I've seen a lot, I've listened to a lot of conversations. I've seen a lot of beautiful brothers and sisters who were in the village after the elders had started passing on. They were not able to deal with the reality. After the elders had made such a beautiful community, some of the elders messed up and didn't push a whole lot of people who were coming of age to start getting jobs, to start being productive, because that's how my family was. I saw my uncles go into their late 20s. 3 uncles. My oldest at the time, I believe, my Uncle Carlos, I think that he was almost 30 years old, and they were still sharing the same bedroom down in the basement. My Uncle Carlos, Keith, and Kevin. The same bedroom all of their lives. So that when my great-grandmother passed on, due to the fact that regardless if everyone lived in the same house or not, we really wasn't prepared for life, because a whole lot of us didn't. We wasn't taught to be productive. The only one that I know who made himself understand that he had to get his life together was my Uncle Derek, who owns a huge construction company right now. He tried to get into the police department at first, and then obviously he didn't want it, or it didn't work out for him, and so he opened up his own construction company, and he's been well ever since then. Now, this day, my uncles are productive and they're living their own lives, but it took the death of my great-grandmother for that to transpire, because we all was in that home And we wasn't prepared to go out there. That's one of the reasons why when I relocated here to Las Vegas, my son's mother, she would expect me to know more things considering my age, but what she didn't realize was my upbringing. I didn't have my dad come around and prepare me for life. My mother, she didn't do anything. I practically grew up on my own. And so in terms of my life, I started learning things as I moved forward. And so a whole lot of the common things that most people would know because their parents taught them, I wasn't aware of these things. And so that put me in the position of my son's mother looking at me as non-productive or stupid, and she never realized, because I never had a chance to tell her, that I'm just a product of my environment, the same as she. Is just that we both come from dysfunctional families, and we both was trying to create our own family. But as I say, it was just too many people involved in that situation. But as far as, I want to get back to this, but as far as what transpired in our community, we had a whole lot of things that were working against us. And even though the blaxploitation movies saved Hollywood, it didn't save us as a people. It was a bad influence on us as a people. And until this day, look at us, this day. Because the elders compromised. This is what I keep trying to tell people. This is why I didn't stand up for them. Because those same women who walked, I believe that church was called Mountain View. Those same older women who came out dressed in white, that's the same generation that you saw in these blaxploitation movies. Those are the same type of women who was all up under these pimps, and they was loving these drug dealers. And then once they looked in the mirror and they hit the wall and they couldn't be fine no more, or some of them had a minor strokes and they wasn't attractive no more, now it's time for Jesus. Now it's time for Jesus. Because I done got old and raggedy, so now it's time for Jesus. It's a shame. But look at the youth that you helped create. Look at Tupac. Smart. Intelligent. Brilliant brother. Where is he? He was smart, but he wasn't intelligent because he didn't make rational decisions towards the end of his life. And this is the reason why he got so caught up. And now he's nowhere to be found. When he was a great asset, he was a great asset to our community. And you will hear in his music the pimp language, the hustler language. He even said that himself. He said you could hear that I've come up in an environment where there's drug dealers and pimps. He said you can hear it in my music. He's talking about his music was based upon the environment. It should have never been so. So we must do better. We must do better. Because we're still able to see this same type of climate in our community. We're still able to see it. So we have a whole lot of work to do. And no matter where you are in this, you might as well say struggle, do your best to make an impact on our youth, a good impact on our youth. and understand that our youth are looking at us. They're looking at us. And we don't want to keep creating these hostile and immoral environments for our youth to continue to observe. Because the next thing you know, there are gonna be more generations of people corrupted. As I said before, the level of intelligence goes down each generation, and therefore each generation goes into further darkness. So we have to stop. We have to stop this cycle from happening. With that being said, I greet everyone a good night. And as I said before, let's choose to do better for ourselves. All right? Everyone have a good night. Stay human. Peace.